primary education. Then we have equal access to affordable technical, vocational, and higher education. We have technical, vocational, and we have higher education. Then we have, okay. We have increasing the number of people with relevant skills for financial success. It's about financial literacy, eliminate all discrimination in education. This is very challenging because we have the qualifier all discrimination in education. We have universal literacy and numeracy. 4.7 education for sustainable development and global citizenship. Actually, what we're doing now is to promote education for global citizenship, collaboration with peoples from other countries. This is very nice. Then we also have build and upgrade inclusive and safe schools. We have expand higher education scholarships for developing countries, and we have increased the supply of qualified teachers in developing countries. And later on, I'm going to show to you how we achieve some of the targets in my context here in the Department of Education in senior high school program. So specifically, I'll be talking about the concept of equity and inclusion, the status quo of no student is left behind, the status quo of no teacher is left behind, and of course, some reflections of these concepts. Now, let's begin. So equity and inclusion. So their agenda as an equal distribution of resources and opportunities that still persist until now. And some of the characteristics are gender, where, for example, males are more preferred than females in terms maybe of gender roles or of positions in the community, although it's not prevalent to all of the countries, but sometimes it's still existing. Remoteness, for example, people who are living in the far-flung areas may not receive same opportunities with people who are living in main areas. Wealth, which is very basic and very obvious in this pandemic time. This pandemic draws a very good demarcation line between the rich and the poor, between the privileged and the underprivileged, between those who can afford and those who cannot afford. Of course, we have disability, ethnicity, we have language, since we have the minority languages and majority languages, migration, displacement, incarceration, we have sexual orientation, whether we like it or not, there is still discrimination in terms of sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, religion and other beliefs and attitudes. And maybe because inequity and maybe exclusions are prevalent or observable in these characteristics of these areas, gender and the rest, maybe because of social norms, of stereotypes like that. So this has implication to education as well. That's why they're brought here as part of the discussion in equity and inclusion in quality education. So according to United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Education, the data was taken 2020, education resources and opportunities are distributed unequally. You take a look at that unequally. This is a world's data. An estimated 258 million children, adolescents, and youth, or 17% of the global total, are in school. Okay, are not in school, sorry. You see that, not in school. And the number out of school youth in sub-Saharan Africa is growing. And we also have here in low and middle income countries, where Philippines is included, adolescents from the richest 20% households are 3 times as likely as those from the poorest to complete lower secondary school. Of those who complete, students from the richest households are twice as likely as those from the poorest households to reach minimum proficiency in reading and mathematics. So there is no much a gap between the rich and the poor relative to reading proficiency here and in mathematics proficiency. In 10 low and middle income countries, children with disabilities were 19% less likely to achieve minimum proficiency in reading than those without disability. So you can see that these figures only show that there is really an issue of um, you know, inclusivity and inequity in education. And this with the pandemic, the situation is even more exacerbated. You take a look at the figure. COVID-19 has wiped out 20 years of education gains, and the gains here may be an academic gain or maybe a monetary gain. You see that? It can be a monetary gain. An additional 101 million or 9% of children in grades 1 through 8 fell below minimum reading proficiency levels in 2020. School closures caused by the pandemic have had devastating consequences for children's learning and well-being. They really go together. Children's learning and well-being. Children's learning because most of the education now is delivered remotely without the presence of the teacher. For example, in the context of the Philippines, where most of the students are in printed modular, there's no intervention of the teacher there, and we have also well-being as being affected by this school closure, since students are just working from home, their parents as well are working from home. So basically, there is that impact to well-being of people, students, and of parents alike. So the most vulnerable children and those unable to access remote learning are at increased risk of never returning to school and of being forced into child marriage or child labor, not at least in the Philippines. With the unprecedented lockdown as a result of the pandemic leading to total or partial school closures in most countries and territories, the teaching workforce was severely affected since many of the teachers nowadays are out of school. I mean, do not have work because some of the schools are closing. And you have here inclusive curricula take the needs of all learners into account. Okay, despite the pandemic, we have to take this concept that inclusive curricula take the needs of all learners into account, and this is really challenging how we take all the needs of learners into account. It is very possible when we only have a small number of students in a class. The class size is very small, for example, like 20. But in the case of the Philippines, where we have the average class size of 70 or sometimes we have 80, this is very difficult to achieve. Inclusion is not just about ensuring everyone is in school or eliminating physical segregation. An inclusive learning experience requires inclusive curriculum, textbooks, and assessment practices where all needs are being catered, as what you can see there on slide. Well, this was according to Albert Einstein. Everybody is a genius. This is like how we have our education system. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. So there is a need to cater individual needs here. Okay, that's the implication of this of that caricature. So inclusiveness and democratic values can also be served through curricula that shift away from knowledge and towards competencies. Okay, the competency-based education. That's what we are adopting, and I guess not only in our country, but even other countries are adopting competency-based education because competencies are transferable. That's why it says there it's more inclusive. It's transferable from one domain to another domain, from one aspect of life to another aspect of life. While some countries promote such competencies to make their workforces internationally competitive, others see them as integral to strengthening inclusion. Exactly, and I believe that. And some of the skills that we need to develop among our students and among us even, the 21st century skills are, for example, critical thinking, our ability to appraise information, our ability to judge information, that we do not just receive information like hook and sinker. We really have to weigh things out. Citizenship, it says there that citizenship is respectfully and positively impacting others and being actively involved in addressing community, national, and global issues. That we should be an asset to the community or to the society. We should be able to offer solutions. All right. So these are skills that we need, okay, to develop among our 21st century learners. And we also have growth mindset, okay, not fixed mindset, but growth mindset, or ability to buoy, or ability to bounce back in case we're facing with adversities in life. And we also have communication, which is very important, our ability to put across our messages, our ideas, our ability to communicate ourselves, very important. And these are all transferable. And creativity, we have to let creative mind work, okay, in finding solution to a problem and in looking for like, yeah, solution to a problem. And of course, we have collaboration, very important since the world now is becoming seamless, the world now is becoming borderless. That skill of collaboration is of utmost importance. Just like what we're doing right now. This is an example of collaboration where speakers are coming from different parts of the world, you know? I mean, yeah, different countries. And it's a good learning opportunities for everyone to learn from each other. So these are the skills that we need to develop among us, not just for our learners, but among us. So this is an example of the curriculum guide for senior high school, as what we already told you that we are adopting competency based as suggested by the that SDG, for example, this is what we're focusing on. The students must be able to describe characteristics, since I'm actually teaching research, quality and quantity for senior high school. And yeah, I would just like to, I mean, I'm just showing to you how we have that curriculum guide as prescribed by our department, the Department of Education. And in terms of like catering the needs of the learners in the case of a of senior high school, because in other countries senior high school is labeled as early college program. Okay, early college for example in America this labeled as early college program, and the Philippines we have senior high school. So catering the needs of the students is not much of a problem, since we have different tracks where students have to choose. Are they into a STEAM program, a science, technology, engineering and mathematics? Are they into humanities? Are they into sports? So therefore, it's their choice. Okay, it's their choice whether they're into that particular strand, and it's expected of them to submit themselves to the trainings provided in a particular strand, whether they're into STEM program, whether they're into HUMS, for example, ABM, that's accountancy, business, and administration, and subjects are aligned to the expected learning outcomes of the program. So they're applied subjects and they're also specialized subjects. So very, that's catering to needs of the learners in the case of the senior high school program here. And modifications also follow the curriculum standards but allow for different individual student outcomes. Basically, for example, in applied subjects, for example, research is an applied subject here in our context. So all of the programs have a research subject, but then the output is specific to the expected learning outcome. For example, for STEM students, they're going to make and they're going to like do inventions, experimentations, and in humanities and social sciences, they'll be tackling social sciences problems. All right, so they have say they're all having research subjects, but then the output is specific to the learning outcomes of the program. It says here that students are often expected to progress at an unrealistic pace, too fast to follow the curriculum. Again, this is a world data, exactly, since most of the time we're counting the competencies, which supposedly we should be able to appraise or like evaluate students' performance. And we, if there is a need to reteach the concept, if there is a need to reteach the competency, then we have to reteach it, not so much of counting of the competencies, although there is a need to meet all of the competencies, but we should be able to go to the level of students' competencies as well. Okay. It says here that home languages need to be promoted to foster inclusivity. Exactly. The in thing now in the classroom is translanguaging, where we allow students to make use of their mother tongue, for example. Like we see code switching not on the level of labeled languages, for example, as Filipino and English, but on the level of how students utilize their linguistic repertoire. Okay, it's more of translanguaging. We are actually capitalizing home languages. All right, own language is a right and an essential part of any group's ethnic identity. So there is more of a celebration of linguistic diversity in the classroom. It also says here textbooks can exclude through omission and misrepresentation. It says there that learning materials can actually be a host for discrimination, can actually be a host of, of biases, okay, through misrepresentation. A textbook development approach that employs inclusive language. There must be an inclusive language, not very feminine, not very masculine. So there must be a balance between femininity and masculinity of the language use of these learning materials represents diverse identities and integrates human rights, serves the purpose of inclusion. Later on, I'm going to give you an example of, in the context of the Philippines, because there was an instance where like people criticized the how farmers in our country were depicted in the learning module. So textbooks may acknowledge minority groups in ways that mitigate or exacerbate the degree to which they are received or perceive themselves as other. So the way they are represented can be mitigated or exacerbated. Okay, they can actually be. I mean, their situation can actually be sensationalized depending on how we depict them, portray certain groups in these learning modules. The rights of people with disabilities were mentioned in 9% of secondary school social science textbooks around 2010 and up from 2% in the 1970s. And this is a good statistics. And we have here disability is often misrepresented in children's reading books. Yeah, actually, characters with disabilities tend to be positioned as inferior. Well, that's a global data. And this is what I told you. This in the context of the Philippines. This is a family of farmer. And you look at the depiction of the family. The family seems very poor, like they're undernourished. That's why people criticize this kind of depiction in one of the modules of the learning materials we have during pandemic, and it went viral online. So it's being broadcasted. I mean, news. Okay. In national television, that there was actually a zero tolerance DepEd to issue disclaimer on poor depiction of farmer in module. So it's not a good practice actually, but then it's good that it was already caught and it was being corrected. Another important concept for inclusive and equitable quality education is a need for a reliable, relevant, and formative assessment, because these promote inclusion. When we talk of relevant assessment, assessment must be contextualized, okay, relative to a particular country or relative to a particular group of people, where these people must be able to understand language being used by these assessments, for example. And formative assessment is very important than summative assessment. Later on, I'm going to show to you why formative assessment is more important than summative assessment, especially this time of a pandemic. Okay, we have high stake assessments. High stake assessments include like summative assessment, admission tests, licensure examinations. These are all high stake assessments. High stakes assessments can lead to negative practices such as selective admission. Okay, well, that violates inclusion if we have selective admission, strict discipline policies, student reassignment, and greater focus and time given to those most likely to succeed. So, well, here in the Philippines, there are universities which have open admission. They do not have like admission test. Well, that's one of the initiatives to promote inclusivity, all right, among in education. So here is a very good analogy of formative assessment and summative assessment to a garden, or a garden analogy of formative assessment and summative assessment. That's what I already told you, that that formative assessment is more important than summative assessment. In formative assessment, as what you can see here, feeding, it's like feeding and watering the plants, where plants here refer to the students. Okay, this is a student, for example, watering the plants appropriate to their needs, directly affecting their growth. Exactly. So what we're doing most often in the class is a form of formative assessment, the daily activities where we are providing students feedback, where we are providing students with information that is needed for them to grow, that is needed for them to develop their skills. So that's why, as what you can see, a formative assessment is very important, because that directly affects the growth of an individual, okay, of students in and as a whole or collectively. However, summative assessment is like measuring the plans. And we're only here interesting to compare and analyze the measurements, and this summative assessment or yeah do not or does not affect the growth of the plants. It's more of like we're only harvesting, okay? We're only harvesting the outcomes of education. If we are so much obsessed of summative assessment, we are just so much obsessed with figures of numbers. What is important here in education is the process. And of course, we are also very particular about the outcome. But if you're going to look at the spectrum, I'm sorry for that. If you're going to look at the spectrum, process is more important than the outcome, because it's in the process where we're actually giving feedback, where we're actually giving input to how students perform, to how students fare, okay, in the class. All right. So every teacher knows that on any given day, a variety of factors, hunger, lack of sleep, social struggles, hormones, etc., can affect a student's ability to focus, sit still, or think straight. So why are we putting so much stock in tests that are really just a snapshot of one particular high stress day? Well, everybody can relate that when we had our university days where we're so much focused on getting high scores in testing in tests. All right. So assessment should focus on students' tasks, how they tackle them. That's why there is now a shift from summative test to formative test. Okay, because assessment should focus on students' tasks, how they tackle them, which ones prove difficult, and how some aspects can be adapted to enable success. A shift in emphasis from high stakes summative assessments at the end of the education cycle to low stakes formative assessment over the education trajectory underpins efforts to make assessment fit for the purpose of inclusive education. So here in our context in the Philippines, especially in basic education, the department has issued interim guidelines for assessment and grading in light of the basic education learning continuity plan during this pandemic. As what you can see, the grading system, we don't have any more summative assessments. We only have written works and we only have performance tasks and not anymore quarterly assessments. So that's actually one way to address, okay, that idea of inclusivity. In many poorer countries, a core underlying problem is that there is insufficient attention to monitoring of learning outcomes. And that's really true. Not only in monitoring, not only insufficient attention to monitoring of learning outcomes, but as well as insufficient attention to monitoring of the quality of learning materials, whether you like it or not. That's really true. I'm going to show to you later a sample of it's not actually a problem, but it's more of like there is a need to improve on the quality of the learning materials because of the lack of quality assurance of the learning materials. Preoccupation with high stakes examinations, often mistakenly considered equivalent to assessment for learning, usually takes over. Exactly. Well, we have summative assessment, that's assessment of learning, formative assessment as assessment for learning. It only varies on the preposition, the of learning and for learning. So this is an example where actually Dep Ed TV draws flack over error in math lesson due to maybe lack of rigorous quality assurance like that. So many people, the netizens, because this went viral, this is not an exclusive data. This actually, I took this from the net because it went viral. This was in the air program, and this is actually according to some of the netizens are the is the correct formulation of this problem. But however, the secretary, the department already issued measures. It says here, control measures in place after DepEd TV airs grammar error. So there was an immediate retraction of the like that a video, that portion of the video, and there was a system in place in order for all of the lessons to go through quality assurance before they'll be released on air, before they'll be released, for example, for duplication for printed materials. So how we democratize education in the new normal, and how we foster inclusivity in this new normal. So basically, we have printed modules. We also have digital modules. Printed modules are appropriate for those who do not have access to internet. We have also digital modules. Digital modules are appropriate or are good for those who have internet access, but not but the connection is not very reliable. So they opt for printed modules, and we also have online classes. Actually, multi-modals. Okay, we promote multimodality just to cater all students from across all walks of life. For example, DepEd also has initiative on DepEd Commons is actually a repository of activities where students can have an account, can log in there, both teachers and students actually, and they can like have an activities where they can assess themselves on a certain competency. They're actually by subject, all right? So we have DepEd Commons, and that can be accessed even without a data. Okay, that can be accessed even without data for as long as they are subscribing to a particular cell site, for example. We also have here DepEd TV aired on a particular television, or sometimes videos were or are posted in the official Facebook channel of DepEd. We also have Eat to Lie. Tulay is actually a Filipino word which means a bridge. Okay, tutoring. It's online tutoring or online tutorial. We have E since it's electronic. This is online. So E to lie. So to lie is a bridge. So it's like where basically, as what you can see there, bridging the gap between those who are in remote areas and those who can actually afford. And there, aside from television, we have also we also have broadcasted lessons over the radio. Okay, DepEd to increase utilization of TV and radio lessons for school year 2021-2022, since most of the provinces here in the country, since provinces they're from far-flung areas, and sometimes internet they're not they have not reached, they do not have internet connection, and they only have that frequency waves. So it's good to deliver lessons via or over the radio. And we also have local initiatives, for example, where they have local YouTube channel where they deliver the lessons via YouTube. This is an initiative per school. And we have also, the department has released this memo, Accelerating DepEd's Computerization Program, Digital Learning Requirements, where the DepEd has released around 1 million SIM cards, okay, to teachers with 102 gigabyte of internet. Well, this is very exciting. This is, yeah, exciting at the same time, very helpful for teachers. Since not everybody has stable internet connection, at least DepEd has provided teachers with free, okay, internet connectivity via SIM cards. And as what I already mentioned, DepEd has placed, okay, at least in my context, has placed a system in order to provide rigorous quality assurance of materials before they'll be released on air, or before they'll be reproduced in printed materials. Guidelines on the evaluation of self-learning modules for quarters 3 and 4 for school year 2020-2021. And there had been presentations of learning materials where the materials are or were being critiqued by experts or experts in the field, just like that. And there were also seminars provided to contextualize or to train teachers how to contextualize assessment across learning areas. All right. So it says here that inclusive teaching requires teachers to recognize the experiences and abilities of every student and to be open to diversity. Exactly. We need to celebrate diversity. Again, many challenges are getting along the way. For example, the number of class size. Inclusive teaching adapts to students' strengths and needs, basically, and inclusive approaches to teaching are based on recognition that many students are not actively participating in the learning process. If we can feel that many students are not participating in the learning process, then we have to rethink your pedagogy. And these are the core values and competence areas of inclusive teaching: support all learners, work with others, value learner diversity, and engage in professional development. That's why my title is about. That's why my principle is on No student is left behind, no teacher should be left behind as well, because there is a need to promote professional development among our teachers, not just focusing merely on the development of the students, because we cannot give what we do not have for sure. Teachers need comprehensive training on inclusion, basically. So that's why some of the teachers are have apprehensions, teaching in an inclusive classroom, because sometimes they do not have training. Teachers need support to ensure inclusive teaching, support coming from their bosses for sure. Inclusive approaches should be a core element of general teacher preparation rather than a specialist topic. This is very important because in our years of training in universities, for example, we are trained in our specialized subject. For example, if you're majoring in English, then you are trained how to, go about with the English language. We're not trained to handle inclusive classroom. So that's why one of the suggestions here to include inclusive education as the core element in all programs. Many education systems struggle to achieve diversity in the teaching profession, basically because of biases. All right, a review of the benefits of hiring people with disabilities pointed to benefits for both employers and employees. Like, we're only hiring individuals who do not have defects, something like that. So there is still a discrimination even to hiring employees, even into hiring teachers. So there's no representation. However, as what you can see here, many individuals, teachers in particular, are now being made aware of inclusive education. You have here webinars on education for all. We have here scholarships given in the context of the Philippines to teachers, sponsored by Simeo. We have here UP scholarship, okay? And we also have here scholarship on massive open online courses, just to provide also teachers with support on to make them to acquire foundations to be more efficient in their teaching, and many more scholarships given to teachers. And in terms of hiring, as what you can see there, this is one of the posters of a certain university where there is an emphasis on this kind of information. This office highly encourages all interested and qualified applicants, including persons with disability. You see that? It's this is to foster inclusivity in the hiring process. Members of indigenous communities and those with diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression to apply. You see, the applications now in universities are more inclusive. And there are also trainings relative to inclusive education, okay, prevalent, existing in our context. You see that division online orientation or training of receiving teachers on inclusive education and special education content and pedagogy. Since some of the teachers or most of the teachers handling inclusive education are not trained. So we have that kind of webinar. This the challenge of the teacher this time of pandemic is more than ever. Is more than ever. Now, if you're going to compare the challenges we had before pre-pandemic and now we have in pandemic time, the challenges really are more than ever. We are running against time, against deadlines, and against workloads. If you're going to look at that, this is me, and that's my workload. You imagine that? I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections. Okay, fifth, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections, and I have my advisory class. And sometimes, if my advisory class has no like teacher of a certain subject, I'll be the one to do like the substitute teaching. You try to imagine that kind of scenario. Very hectic, overloaded. And you look at that kind of, class size. I'm actually using Discord. You have that 7 to 1, excluding those who were not yet there. The average class size, and at least in my context, okay, in my station, is actually 70 to 80. That's the average class size. And how can you cater individual needs if the class size is that much? And 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 it's obvious that teachers are are haggard. You see that? Teachers are really are really haggard given that kind of situation. Now, if you're going to compare class size in highly developed areas, if you can see that in Lithuania and Sweden, Netherlands, United Kingdom, and Chile, their class size is more or less is in basic education. You have their upper secondary. It's just like the highest, okay, it's just 20. You imagine that? The class size is just 20 in a particular classroom. But in developing countries, just like in my case, we have the average class size of 60, of 70, of 80, for example. And how can we go about it? That's really a question. That's why I have this kind of thought. um, from the website We Teach, Let's Talk, administrators want teachers to be sensitive to the home life of kids. Well, administrators need to be sensitive to the home life of their teachers. They deal with divorce, depression, family illness, and other stresses that can have a profound impact. They need compassion too. You see, that's why if you're an advocate of no child is left behind, we can also include no teachers would be left behind as well. According to boardteachers.com, stop putting the blame for teachers being exhausted, overworked, and overwhelmed on them not taking care of themselves. Instead, support teachers by lessening their workloads and responsibilities. That's really true. And okay, this one very don't you worry, I'm almost to my last slide. This is very intriguing. Have you graded your papers yet? You know, grading papers. This a simple chart shows at a glance how much time it takes a teacher to grade one set of papers. This work usually cannot be done in class because students need the teacher's attention for a variety of reasons, good and bad, answering the same questions many times, keeping students on task, and discipline. You take a look at that. We have 150 students for 5 minutes, for example, then you'll have like 13 hours to devote for that. And in my case, I have 6 sections and I'm handling the average class size 70. You imagine that? 70 times 6, that's 420 times, for example, 5 minutes. How many minutes would be that? 420 times 5. So that gives you around 2,100 minutes. That's around 35 hours. Imagine checking papers for 5 days for that 6 sections. Well, that's really sad. Well, my reflection again, I'm almost done. The beauty, inclusivity, and equity were attained by all means at all costs. Yeah, exactly. Because we need to continue education despite the pandemic. Education in the new normal has been a huge success to all of the countries, of course, worthy for celebration, and we're happy for that as teachers. What about the ugly? Quality education has been compromised. Given my context, for example, we have the average class size of 80 plus distance education for printed modular, no teacher intervention. Okay, no teacher has been there to explain the lesson. And we have that kind of thinking of mass promotion since we are in pandemic time. So why not promote all? Which is really a bad concept. Teachers working and health condition are at risk and workload is doubled, even tripled. You know that everything is instant. Like your boss is announcing the like certain deadline and the deadline is in the afternoon. They're expecting you to comply right away. The deadlines, like everything is instant. No child is left behind, no teacher should be left behind as well. Teachers must be empowered and supported. We cannot give what we do not have, as already mentioned. Learners must receive quality learning instruction regardless of political, physical, and psychological considerations, and molding our learners with standards acceptable by the international community, immersing them with lifelong learning competencies are very important. And to end, inclusiveness should not only be about infrastructure of learning materials and assessment materials. It should be also about inclusive psychological and mental environment where everyone, of course, everyone, students and teachers, is accepted and celebrated. And let me leave you the following questions. It's all up to you to tinker, to ponder on this. How does COVID-19 pandemic contribute to inclusivity of education? Because much has been done about the ill effects of COVID-19. What about the positive contribution, of COVID-19 to inclusivity of education? How can we address the digital divide in our own little contributions? And how can teachers remain dedicated, committed, and motivated in teaching in midst of the challenges in this new normal? Well, it's all up to you to answer. And with that, I'd like to say, being a teacher is saying tomorrow will be a better day until you retire. Have a happy Teachers Day to everyone, to those who are teachers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rex. That's a very, very insightful 40 minutes for us, I guess, because I personally, as a teacher myself, and here's a lot of students here, And I believe that we all are having a different kind of pressure. That what you have presented is very, very insightful. Thank you. And maybe if you have questions from this presentation, please put it on the link stated before. And maybe the next one is Miss Wan Juliana. Are you ready? Okay, you are definitely very ready. Okay, the time
Yes.
is yours.
All right. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum. Apa kabar semua? How are you? Hope everyone is in the best condition despite of the COVID pandemic. Thank you, moderator Ibu Nurina, for the warm welcome. Dr. Rex, what a wonderful and interesting topic, and thank you for sharing with us. Yes, the lecturer is also exhausted too. All right, first and foremost, I would like to share my gratitude to the organizer for the opportunity in inviting me here as a guest lecturer and to share some knowledge on this particular topic. And thank you for that. Let me introduce about myself. My name is Wan Juliana Wahid, and I'm here today to share some sharing of the lecture entitled The Beauty of Pua Kumbu Design Motif. And my lecture will be covered on the SDG for quality education. Well, yeah, this is me. I am a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Art and Design in one of the public university in Malaysia, situated at State of Sarawak, which known as University Teknologi Mara Sarawak. Currently, I'm pursuing my PhD in Design Economic Study in University Malaysia Sarawak, UNIMAS. And for my education background, I have Master of Art and Cultural Management, degree honors and diploma in industrial design. And you can reach me via my email address as stated here. Or if you want to know more about me, just scroll up my name in Facebook or ResearchGate. Enough with the introduction. All right, for the lecture, here is the learning outcome that we want to achieve at the end of today's sharing. They have three learning outcomes, which is to identify the category of Pua Kumbu design motif, to comprehend the art knowledge of Pua Kumbu design, and finally, to appreciate the weaver roles in the Pua Kumbu creation. And after my session, I bet everyone can become the Pua Kumbu design motif expert. Just joking, yeah? All right, ladies and gentlemen, are you familiar with this textile? Or maybe you scroll up in the internet and happen to see this textile? Can I see some reactions? Maybe you can share some like thumbs up or love reactions here. Just click the reaction button at the bottom. Can I see? Yeah, that's good. All right, thank you. Some of you familiar with this textile. That is a great news. For the introduction, ladies and gentlemen, Pua Kumbu is belong to the Iban community, which is one of the largest tribe in Sarawak. Historically, the Iban community lived as nomads in Borneo and were known for their bravery, reflecting their reputations as fighters and headhunters and being feared by many in the past. The Iban see themselves as a great tribes and will do anything to protect their culture and tradition from extinction. Pua Kumbu, made of woven cottons, is the most famous textile from the Iban people in Sarawak. They are strongly bounded to their custom and belief, and their understanding is evidently well matched and crafted in Pua Kumbu. In most of societies, Weaving is linked to the woman and their status within the community is revealed by the type of motif they weave. All right. As you can see here, this is me. I just want to try out. I don't know how to do the weaving. Still novice. As you can see here, these are the materials and the tools used when the weavers are doing their weaving activity. This weaving activity begins with the weaver have to arrange the thread carefully onto this weaving set. This white thread, as you can see here, is act as the base for the textile. Look at this. This is a nylon rope where the weavers use to tidying up their desired or preferable design motif. The motif can be about anything, which are depending to the weaver's local knowledge. And what is the best part here is, which make me so amazed with their talents, is because most of the time when the weaver want to do the design motif, they are not referring to any blueprint or sketches. They just do it, simple as that, which are based on their creativity and instinct. Then after that, they add some colors to the thread. Basically, they use the original colors like from flowers and plants. Usually, the process took about 3 to 4 weeks to complete one wakumbu. However, the duration can sometimes drag the process up to 6 and 8 weeks, which are depending to the complexity of the design motif, the difficulties in the making of the motif because of the size and the size of the wakumbu and etc. I would like to share with you one video which I take the video during I doing my research interview with one weaver. So these are the weaving set. So I'm doing this research at one area in Sarawak, which is in Kapit. So basically, yeah, they are already tidying up the nylon with the nylon rope and arrange the thread nicely. So you can see the design, everything. So they have to arrange, she have to arrange the thread one by one in order to ensure that the desired design is become what she dream of. So yeah. So ladies and gentlemen, Kumbu is not new. It's not a new textile. The Kumbu is one of the top cultural artifacts in Malaysia from the Iban indigenous tribe and is protected separately by the Iban community, especially the older generation. The beauty of Kumbu is not merely a cultural expression, but also represent the wealth of information to pass from one generation to another. The art of creating Kumbu design motif is based on the body of knowledge gathered through collective memory and the conservation of Kumbu knowledge and history. So, what we can say here, the weavers are the mastermind of this majestic art piece. The visual complexity, the arrangements of the motifs is found to be very subjective, which are not only relying on the outer look, only to the design motif, but also relies to the stories that weaver try to portray. The concept of producing the design motif of Kumbu were based on the weaver's interpretations, which to some weavers, they are loved to do like a very huge, big size of design motif, and some may not. Every design motif applied in the Kumbu is associated to one another, and only by having all of the design arranged together, it can interpret the weaver's encoded messages. That is the essence. Ladies and gentlemen, based on the interview that I made with the weavers, some of the weavers still performing the mirroring ritual. But to some, they did not practice any ritual, which are depending on their belief. However, to the high-ranking motif, which what you can see here in the slides, which have the humanoid figures or predatory types of animal, still need to perform the mirroring ritual. Mirroring is like the activity of offering ceremony, like you offering food, which is one of the traditional cultures performed by the Iban people in Sarawak. It is believed to calm the soul of the motif. Mirroring ceremonies are generally performed to honor the Patara, gods, the spirit, and ancestor. In other cases, they can be performed to make a wish or to seek permission in weaving and high-ranking motif. However, ladies and gentlemen, the floral motif does not need to performing any ritual. But again, it depends on the weaver's belief. In the terms of color preferences, it based on the weaver's creativity. Nevertheless, some weavers still uphold the old tradition, the antique concept in designing and producing the textile with a bit of modification of colors and selections of motifs to meet with the current demands. Most of the color applied to the art piece is using the earthen color and the Sarawak flag color, such as red, black, white, or even maroon. The use of this similar coat of earthen color has been widely used, such as blue, purple, and also green, which allow wider market demand from various populations. All right, for the design origins, the essence of designing this art piece was basically based on the local knowledge acquired by the weavers, which are guided by the Iban cultures, dream, Iban folklores, the surroundings, and taboos. The weaver's interpretations is elaborated and formed as one complete design with meaning and stories. The motif applied were constructed using the geometrical shape, which were decorated based on the weaver's creativity, the imitations of the nature, mimicking the existing design from the ancestor inheritance and the weaver's interpretation. Like this one, let me show to you. This is terabai, what we call as terabai or shield. Has been widely been designed as one of the Pakumbu design motif element. Beside that, they have like the Paku Pakis plants and also famously been demonstrated as the design motif. And other than that is the motif of lizards or snakes or maybe birds or mountain. Anything can become the weaver inspiration. Just name it. Whatever they saw, it's become the inspiration for them. Okay. I would like to highlight on 5 different categories of design motifs which have been widely applied on the textile and separated based on the choice of the design applied. We have here flora, fauna, humanoid design, abstract, and contemporary category. Each of these categories have distinctive characteristics which are strictly based on the weaver's interpretation, taboos, and local knowledge of their surrounding. For the contemporary category, the design motif also been improvised with the everyday activity, or sometimes the national issue become the central idea of the Pua Kumbu textile. And now we go to the first category, the flora. Come, look closer. This is the Pua Kumbu with the motif of buah gelong, which are inspired from the Paku Pakis plant shape. You can see here, the design of the Paku Pakis were arranged and decorated nicely in the textile. Many floral designs were originally inspired by plants, motifs such as Paku Pakis, bamboo shoots, and midden leaf. The complexity of the buah gelong design can be found in the design of geometrical shapes, which are based on the size of the design and the interpretation of the weavers. Sometimes it can be named as buah gelong 6 or buah gelong 8, which are depending on the curve made by the weaver. Look at this buah gelong shape. It is counted as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So this shape is buah gelong 8. As easy as that. So now everyone knows how to count it. So most floral motif can be designed by anyone as it does not embody any ritual or taboos. Okay, for the fauna category, it is most likely have the different concept in the making, especially to the predatory types of animal design motif. The fauna design motif were generally inspired by the Iban myth and legends such as snakes. You know snakes? They call here is as nabau, crocodile, or buaya. In Malay, we call buaya, but for the Iban language, they said baya. Okay, birds, lizards, spiders, crabfish, and many, many more. You can see here, this motif named as burung bersugu shows the activity of bird cleaning themselves. Usually, the bird have a basic shape, which have the shape of wing. This is a wing, the body of the birds, and also the head. Okay, this is the basic shape. So I want to share with you one video when I interviewed the weaver in Sarawak, Betong, where the weaver explained on the motif name. All right. So here is the video. See, all factor is there. We are so impressed with the explanation of the design motif applied. Genius. All right, let's move on. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the fauna category, here are the design of the high-ranking motif applied to Puah Kumbu. To some weavers, the mirroring ritual should be performed to the humanoid figure and predatory types of animal design motif, such as nabau or snake, or this one, baya or crocodile. The baya or crocodile design motif is one of the sample of the fauna in the predatory types of animal motif. Yeah, in this design motif, you could not simply be arranged, but it should be designed in the complete set. The motif should be designed together with the house. Like you see in the design of the baya, they have like a shape like this one. This is what we call as a house. In order to make sure the motif not going anywhere. That is the rules, the taboo that they hold. All right. And also should include like foot here. Like this one in the motif of Nabao, you can see here the motif of human at the bottom. So they believe if they put food like a fish or people, that could calm the spirit. Or like this one. This is another one. This is the motif of goddess with two heads. You can see with two heads. The weaver has included food at the bottom in the shape of human motif. Yeah, back again is because they believe it can calm the spirit. Okay. For this motif, they have name. Seru Angga, badan satu kepala dua, mandi di sungai Linggajul. So this image is very sacred for the Iban community. Iban people perceive the animated design motif as sacred and having souls. Thus, they could not be designed unelaborately without proper understanding. The weavers operated on the belief that if the design motif incorporated with names, the complete set of design should be presented. I want to share with you another video. This is during the interview session with the weaver in Kapit, Sarawak. So you can see this is the actual size of the puah kumbu. All right. All right. The weaver told me she cannot stop or going anyway if the motif like this one is not in complete form. Whereas she cannot do the design motif halfway. Okay, like this one, they should be in the complete design. That is one of the taboos that is still practiced until now. Okay, all right. Patara, okay, kind of motif, Patara, or known as God, for the Iban community was the high-ranking motif and cannot simply be weaved. This prominent design could only be weaved if the weavers were granted permission from the Iban goddesses by dreams. The dreams were signed from the goddesses that the craftsman could create the design motif, and it must be preceded with the conduct of the mirroring ritual, like offering food to avoid bad signs. In fact, most highly ranked design motifs could only be woven by the eldest weavers with extensive experience. In my field trip in Betong, Sarawak, there is one male weaver who are actively doing the weaving activity and describe this motif as katan pindah, which is showing the human motif, the male one, in a moving situation. And this is the house. They put house here. So I would like to share with you one video. The motif of house should be included in the textile. So this is another one. Basically, when the weavers want to put any humanoid design, any human figure in the pakumbu, the male will become the subject, not female. Okay. So for the abstract design, for this category does not need to perform any ritual. You just can do it. But with the basic of the weaving, of course. Basically, the inspiration is from their surrounding with more striking and contemporary color, like this one. The design is inspired from Sarawak layer cake, what we call here as cake lapis, which are mostly the all-time favorite souvenirs for the tourists and also the local favorite savory. And this is the design for this one. This is what we call as terabai, the Iban shield, which is in past being used widely as shield during war. But now there is no war, every tribe in Sarawak living in harmony, and terabai is now was one of the favorite souvenir to bring back home. Okay, for the contemporary design, some other weavers portray the design motif of puah kumbu in different angles and themes, which were approaching a different concept and more contemporary in presenting the idea on the sacred textile. Like this one, you can see this puah kumbu, they have the humanoid images of the Muslim at the bottom with the elaborations of mosque at the top. You can see here the flags designed on the both sides. Surprisingly, the idea was contradict to the common look of the puah kumbu textile, which is supposed to look antique, mystery, and full of plants. During the interview sessions, the weaver expressed that this is to show her appreciation of her surroundings and families by weaving her story into her design. A further observations and in-depth interview revealed that the weaver had 3 Muslim sons-in-law and thus had been familiar to the Islam religion, in spite of different religions and culture practiced by them respectively. Still, the assimilation was visible in the incorporation of the mosque as part of her Pakumbu design motif. This action demonstrated that the weaver willingly embraced the integration and assimilation of contemporary design motif, rather than just stay with the ordinary look of the Pakumbu textile. And yeah, this is another one, the motif of the hornbill. The hornbill is symbolized as strength and bravery for the Iban population, which are connected closely to Sarawak. That is why Sarawak is known as the land of the hornbill. So this design is actually based on the demand. When I asked the weaver why he do this kind of design, she said that because it's based on the demand. The Korean people, the Korean tourists, the Japanese tourists, they love to see this kind of the design. So yeah, she do this design. All right. So this is the weavers. This is another one, very interesting. The same weavers, which is depicting the idea of the crashing airplane of MH370 as a design motif in this art piece. This iconic action reflected that the Pakumbu weaver are open to the new changes and not connected to the design motif of Iban culture only. Regardless of upholding the Iban culture value in the art piece, the need to add and modify some element is negotiable. Even the trend is unpopular to some, but the idea could be the stepping stone to preserve this tangible culture and can eliminate the knowledge barrier of the Pakumbu design motif. See, now can you see the airplane? So this one is like that. We are going to travel. This is based on her explanation. The weaver. Very interesting. Genius. All right. So now we come to the end, ladies and gentlemen, the conclusion. This complicated of the art piece highlight the Iban identity of as it resembles the Iban community way of life, belief, and surrounding, which are hinted in every design motif, and it were connected to the taboos and the Iban belief, which were constructed in the layout pattern as the Pakumbu visual complexity, and it does carry meaning. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, again, by fostering early educations of the intangible cultural heritage of Pakumbu to the community, it can lead to a rational justification in handling this art piece properly and safeguarding the Pakumbu in the long term. All right, that's all from me. I bet if you are seeing or buying this textile in future, then you know how to read the design motif. Thank you, and back to you, Dr. Norina.
Thank you very much, Ms. Juliana. It's a very, very interesting presentation that we see a textile product. It is also a heritage of Payakumbuh. And I think what's interesting is I see that the design is also evolving. It's based on the situation and the daily life of the people, and especially the weaver. Okay, that's very, very interesting. Thank you. And now we are moving on to the next session. It's the questions and answer session. I see that we have some of the question here. Maybe I will read the first question. It's for Dr. Rex. It's from, the question is, it's quite simple. It's how to develop a soft skill during the pandemic. I think it's for Dr. X. Okay, Dr. X, you are with us.
Yes.
Okay, you can.
All right, all right. Thank you for that question. How to develop soft skills? Wow. In this time of pandemic, that's for me the most important skills that we can also develop alongside with hard skills. That soft skills, for example, example of soft skills, for example, patience, okay, and the like that would help them more of like able to live, okay, this time of pandemic. The question is how. Um, soft skills, to me, cannot be directly taught. That can be learned through a process. Like they're going to, for example, you're going to give them a project like that, and then along the process, you're going to like process their learning. They're going to process what they've gone through. You're going to process their experiences, and in a way, the way they respond to it. Okay, the way they respond to it. Okay, like when they're in a group, like when there are conflicts and they're able to resolve it. Okay, the way they resolve the conflict is actually a form of a soft skill. So again, it can be learned through a process. And in terms of a school or mean academic activity, it can be in a project based activity where they can collaborate with each other, where they can interact with each other. That's to me the perfect venue where they can develop their soft skills. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, I think soft skill you gain through a certain process. So you can just learn or read textbook, but you have to sometimes experience it by yourself. But maybe I may I have a question
Sure.
from me? Okay,
Sure.
okay, okay. I would like to ask because you said before in your presentation that there are several competencies that uh, today a student should have, uh, and it's only in high school because you said like in some countries it's a pre-college for them, and what's we are facing right now is we are in the pandemic situations where we see that all the process, especially for the soft skill, is a little bit difficult because we are by ourselves, like right now. But maybe from all the competencies like critical thinking, communication, creativity, and others that you say, I think which one? Maybe if you have to advise the students here, maybe we can master it like once, but which one is the most crucial, or you have to uh, like most of the presentation of from all of the competency you said? Maybe you can answer.
Wow, that's a very nice question. In this time of pandemic where there is a lot of misinformation, critical thinking is the most important skill that we need to develop. We should be able to appraise information. We should be able to evaluate information, whether this has certain logic, whether this is true or not. Critical thinking for me is in this time of pandemic is very important together with communication, of course. We should be able to clearly articulate our ideas, okay, to clearly we should be taught how to communicate properly in the spirit of beneficence, that you're not only benefiting, that others also can benefit from what you are communicating.
Okay, thank you. So I know that it's critical thinking you have to master first. Okay, so
Yes.
for all the students here, okay, you hear that. I think critical thinking is something really necessary, like not for all students but also for us. But it's a something that we can learn, uh, not by interaction, but you have to like reflect on yourself. Okay,
Correct.
okay, I take a good note. Thank you very much, Dr. X. Maybe before we move on the second speaker questions, any more question? This is a very interesting presentation. If you have a following question, you can ask directly here. Okay, and the next question is for Miss Wan Julian. There's a question for you, Miss Juliana. Um, it's how because you say that all the process is a little bit mythical. They have to have a certain dream and so on for the weaver in the Payakumbuh. But can you tell us how the weaver transfer their knowledge for the younger weaver? Because it's like they have to have certain rituals. Besides that, how the creative inspirations arise? That's the question for you, Miss Juliana.
All right, thank you for the question. It's a very interesting question. Basically, when I'm doing my research interview with the weavers, one of the weavers, they don't have any talents of doing the weave. So what she do is they just mimicking or the existing design. Whatever design they have in the market, they just mimicking again. That's just copy it. Yeah. But for the design with the high ranking motif like the predatory motif or the humanoid design motif, for the beginner, you cannot do that. All right, you can try to start with the design of the floral motif because that one anyone can do. If you have the talent of weaving, you know how to do weave, then you can just do it. But for the predatory types, you cannot do that. Or the humanoid design because they have some ritual that you have to follow.
Okay, I see. So they're all different motifs you learn if you are a beginner weaver, and then as time you are more mastering the weaving technique, and then you are able to do a certain amount, certain other designs like the humanoids.
Yes.
Okay, but very interesting. How's the pandemic situation? It's from me maybe the question, because it's I bet if there are certain motifs, they should be very expensive because it takes 3 to 4 weeks to make a piece of product. But how about the pandemic situation affect the weaving? Is there something different they do nowadays?
Okay, thank you. Oh yeah, because of the pandemics, yeah, the economy hits everyone, including the weavers. But we have like Tunjuga Foundation here. When anyone want to like order or want to reserve the Pakumbu, they just can do it by online. And the Pakumbu itself is already famous, and it has in the market. And if they want to like, yeah, to reserve or buy the Pakumbu, they can just do it by online. Everything now is only simple as that.
Okay, so they have to move the selling activity online also?
Yes, selling activity online. So maybe if you live here, you can just go to waterfront. We have like waterfront. They have so many lots of shops. Then you can just go and buy it. But the important thing is you have to understand the motif, because some of the motif is very sacred. You cannot put in, like for the Islamic people, for the Islam, you cannot buy the design of the patara or gods because it's not suitable to our religions. Yeah, so maybe you can buy like the floral design or the abstract or the contemporary design, which is most likely suitable to the religions. Because the kinds of the motif, like the high ranking motif, sometimes some of the weavers, they still during the mirroring ritual, the offering, they will have so like that, yeah, that kind of things.
Okay, interesting. Maybe one day if we visit Payakumbuh, we should buy a piece of the weaving product. It's very,
Yes,
very beautiful.
please, and come to Sarawak, visit to Sarawak.
Yes, I never been to Sarawak. It's definitely it's going to visit it hopefully one day. Okay, thank you very much. I think that's all the question for this afternoon session. It's still afternoon in Philippines and Malaysia. Okay. I'd like to say thank you for Dr. Rex and Ms. Juliana for your attendance today. Thank you very much for sharing us your very interesting presentation. I think we can get the silver lining here. This is education is a very, very important, especially in maybe for our own country, for Indonesia as a developing country. Education is something that we will maybe again the benefits not like tomorrow, but it's an asset for our country. Okay, thank you once again for the speaker. And now I'm giving back it to the Master of Ceremony, Ochi. Thank you very much. It's yours, Rana.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Rex Lim and Mrs. Juliana too for the excellent lecture today. And also thank you for Bu Nurina for conducting these amazing sessions. Please everyone give applause to our speaker and moderator by Zoom reaction feature. Yay. Okay, furthermore, we will move to our next agenda. We will give a present, a certificate awarding to our speaker and also our moderator today. So the first certificate for Dr. Rex Lim. Okay, so the next certificate is for Mrs. Wan Juliana. And lastly is for Ibu Nurina Orta. Okay, once again, thank you again to Dr. Axley, Mrs. Juliana, and Ibu Nurina for your availability on today's guest lecture series on SDGs. We believe that your lecture will be useful for all of the participants in the present or even in the future. Okay, so before we end our lecture today, I would like to inform you that we will have GLS on SDGs again next week. And we will have clean water from psychic perspective delivered by Dr. Siti Nurbaya Supadan. Okay, thank you. And before we end our lecture today, I would like to invite all of the participants as well as the honorable speaker and moderator to take a group photo. So I hope that all the participants, please open your camera and so we can take a photo together. Okay, I see there is, I see there is 2 slides who's turning on the camera. Okay. Okay, let me count on a 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, to the next slide. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I think there is no one who's opening their camera again. It's okay. And now we have finished our group photo. For participants, please fill the feedback through the link bit.ly/feedback_GLS that you can also see in the Zoom chat room. The deadline for filling the feedback form is 1 hour after we finish the session. We want to remind you to the participant who will get a stamp are the participant who come on time, punctually, and join this event until the end, and also fill the feedback form. And finally, we reach the end of today's guest lecture series, and we sincerely apologize for any mistakes we may have made in the presenting as a Master of Ceremony and committee. Thank you for our honorable speakers, moderator, and all participants for the attention and cooperation. We hope to see you soon in other events and other occasions in the future. Don't forget to follow our social media on Instagram at ITS International Office and Facebook, and keep up about our programs. That's for me. Good afternoon and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much to Dr. Rex and also Ms. Wan Juliana and Ibu Nurina Orta. And Ms. Ochik, see you next week and see you on the next event. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Thank you. We'll end the session in a 3, 2, 1.